Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Sodanandana Yamuna Tiravanachari. Vanachari. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tiravanachari. Vanachari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Asatara Satya Shri Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai. Mathura Dhama Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai. Gangamaya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane. Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pacharne Nivasesisa Nivadi Paskatyade Satarne. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Lalita Shri Vichakam Vitamscha. Vanchakalpachubhischa Kipasindavya Bhatapati Tanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavebi Namo Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it is June 20th, 2022 in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and we're reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 37, Text 7. Same damanena sakrishna bahuna nirudavayush charanamscha vikshipam prasvina gatra parivrittalochana papatalandam visrijam kshatau vyasu. Same damanena. Expanding. That word sounds like it's expanding, isn't it? There's an onomatopoeia in there. Saha, he, Krishna Bahuna, by Lord Krishna's arm. Nirudha, stopped. Vayuhu, his breathing. Charanam, his legs. Cha, and Vikshipan, throwing about. Prashvina, perspiring. Gatraha, his body. Parivritta, rolling. Lochanaha, his eyes. Papata, he fell down. Landam, feces. Visrajan, excreting. Kshitau, unto the ground. Vyasuhu, lifeless. BBT translation. As Lord Krishna's expanding arm completely blocked Keshi's breathing, his legs kicked convulsively, his body became covered with sweat, and his eyes rolled around. The demons then passed stool and fell on the ground dead. Jai. Haribo. All right, reading Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's comment. There's no BBT commentary. He just says that expelling stool, Keshi expired. That's it for Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And Sanatana Goswami's, which is very, very similar to Jiva Goswami, so we're only going to read Sanatana Goswami's. By Krishna's arm, which completely expanded, Same Damanena, Keshi's breathing was blocked. He expanded his arm until Keshi's body burst. By that, the demon died. Narada says in Harivamsa, when your arm extending to your knee made his body fall, he quickly died by the Creator's will. Same damanena sakrishna bahuna niruda vayus charanams tavikshipam prasvina gatra parivritta lochana papatalandam visrajam shito vyasu. As Lord Krishna's expanding arm completely blocked Keshi's breathing, his legs kicked convulsively, his body became covered with sweat, and his eyes rolled around. The demon then passed stool and fell on the ground dead. So I'd like to read the description of this Leela from the Gopal Champu. The demon surpassed the sky and spread everywhere. He opened his mouth as if to swallow the sky. He attacked the sky with his hooves. Krishna countered all his moves. As ocean waves toss piles of foam, Krishna threw the strong demon high in the air as if he were a bunch of dense hairs, like a wig, like it's like a wig up in the air, with his feet and tail upwards. So he was upside down, right? His feet and tail were up, and his body was down. The demon landed 100 dhanush away. A dhanush, anyone know what a dhanush is? A bow. So you can measure by bows. Regaining consciousness, Keshi stood up. With gaping mouth, he charged Krishna. Krishna shoved his left arm into his mouth like a snake entering a frog's mouth. Now that's interesting because we usually think of the frog entering the snake's mouth, not the snake entering the frog's mouth. In the spirit of Viraras, Krishna's arm, like a divine snake, grew large in the demon's throat. Because of the arm's power, Keshi's teeth fell out as if he were afflicted with poison. His teeth fell out, his senses stopped functioning, his body began to shiver. Old age approached and death waited. So he got old age and death very fast. Accelerated old age. When Krishna's arm blocked Keshi's throat, all the demon's organs burst open. It seemed that out of grief for the blocked throat, all the limbs were obedient to it. That's a poetic description. Did his life air leave, thinking that Krishna's arm, which blocked Keshi's throat, was the destroyer of the life airs of the universe? One door marked named the throat was blocked. We will make many doors so we can get out. The senses then made many holes in the body and left. So here's a whole personification of the life airs, a poeticized description with poetic ornaments. When the life air left the body, similar to a house, right? We have a similar description in the Bhagavatam of Puranjana, that his body is compared there to a city. Krishna's arm, like a guest, also left the body. So the house falls apart, and the guest also leaves, right? Except for the master of the body, the life air, the house was completely destroyed. By good fortune, the subtle body was also destroyed. Now that's important because liberation means liberation from the subtle body. Like sometimes people think they'll get liberated if they kill their gross body, but it doesn't work. It's just like thinking you're going to get liberated if you burn down your house, All you'll be is houseless. That means his mentality was destroyed. His demoniac mentality was destroyed. His material attachments were destroyed. When Krishna pulled his arm from Keshi's throat, the demon, gleaming like a brahmastra at the time of destruction, attained a suitable spiritual nature. It is proper that the demon expelled stool, giving up all impurity when he died. So this passing stool we're reading about in today's verse, it's symbolic of giving up all of his anarthas. The mercy that Krishna shows to the demons by giving them liberation is beyond reasoning. Some describe Keshi's body through two comparisons, like Jarasanda's body, which, what happened to Jarasanda's body? Split into. Or like a Kartaki fruit, which pretty sure that's a jackfruit, that you break up into pieces, right? When the horse demon's body was thus divided and the jiva attained sayujya, the devatas with pure mind showered flowers, some of this will be discussed tomorrow, and indicated Krishna's intentions by their words, "Since you open your mouth to swallow my whole body, I will offer my arm to your mouth to see it get swallowed. O proud horse, if your life air leaves because of my arm entering, why did you arrogantly try to swallow everyone?" After Keshi's death, the people of Vraja talked like the rumbling of clouds and joyfully surrounded Krishna, who was standing motionless. He shed tears of joy, which flowed in showers with the force of a waterfall. The demon lay on the earth. With great desire, they placed Krishna in the center and experienced within themselves appropriate love in various degrees of prema. Though Keshi had been killed and divided into two parts, they thought that he could not split. Thus they considered themselves fortunate. Embracing each other but not Krishna, they developed sattvika bhavas on thinking of Krishna. That's interesting. After the killing of Bakasura, everybody was embracing Krishna. Now here they're embracing each other. But embracing each other, thinking of Krishna, they develop ecstasy. And this is what our devotee relationships are supposed to be about, that we have love with each other, thinking of Krishna. After a short time, they recovered consciousness and along with Krishna went to the Yamuna and bathed. The wise know that place as Keshi Tirtha, the best of holy places even today. Taking shelter of another ghat nearby on the banks surrounded by trees where the Yamuna becomes crooked, they took rest to get relief from their fatigue. The ancients called this place Chaina Ghat, and today it is called Chir Ghat. In Mathura district, Chaina means the happiness of resting. They thought optimistically that the death of Keshi would be the end of Kamsa's ill intentions toward them, and thus their happiness doubled. So they thought, this is it. Now that Keshi's dead, we're not going to have any trouble from Kamsa. We ever think like that? This has happened now, my troubles are over. Their mouths danced with Krishna's extensive glories. What a wonderful poetic description. Their mouths danced with Krishna's extensive glories. The people offered respects to him. When he came among them, the residents of Vraja surrounded him, and then following Nanda, first retrieved the cows. The cowherd said, "Hey, hey," and that sound became clearly associated with Krishna. Just as when the sound of falling rain is heard, the deep rumbling of clouds accompanies it. The cowherds and Krishna, conquerors of enemies, went to gather the cows, while Nanda alone remained in Vraja. So that's from the Gopal Champu, the description. Keshi Ghat is where they went, and then they went to Chir Ghat. So first they went to Keshi Ghat, then they went to Chir Ghat. Sorry if that wasn't, or Keshi Tirtha, yeah. Keshi Tirtha and Chir Ghat. And then I went to read something from the Hamsa Duta, which really struck me when I read it, and it's something that I've I meditate on from time to time ever since. So this is Hamsadutta written by Rupa Goswami. And this is the gopis, especially Lalita, talking to a swan while Krishna is in Mathura and asking the swan to be their messenger. That's why it's called Hamsadutta. And Prabhupada, of course, named a disciple Hamsadutta, the swan messenger. So here the gopis are describing Krishna to the swan so he can deliver this message to Krishna. And it's either Mathura or Dwarka. Maybe Dwarka. His 2 arms, endowed with most charming fragrance, conquered 2 pillars of sapphires shining everywhere, and graced with a bracelet of Keshi's teeth marks, which strongly embraced the throats of all the gopis, overwhelmed with love, remain victorious. So I thought that interesting that Krishna's left arm has a bracelet. So I always envisioned it on his upper arm. I mean, perhaps it would say an armlet, but I've always envisioned it on his upper arm, that Krishna puts his left arm into Keshi, and Keshi's teeth make this mark, and then Keshi's teeth fall out. The heat of Krishna's arm makes Keshi's teeth fall out. So I thought we'd talk today about how everything about Krishna is very sweet. Madhuradi patera kilam madhuram. That Krishna's arm is very sweet. His expanding, his form that can expand is very sweet, and his killing of the demons is very sweet. Now, of the 3, I mean, Rupa is, of course, in that song, and his demon killings is also in that song, but his arms specifically are not in that song, but we'll add his arms. Actually, my godbrother, Dravida Prabhu, he's written in English a poem based on the Madhurastakam, where he mentions many, many other things besides the original song as being sweet. So his arms are very sweet. So thinking about this mark of Keshi's teeth on his arm, so this is very extraordinary. So first of all, Krishna's body is eternal and unchangeable, which means the marks must be there always. And that's because, of course, the killing of these demons happens over and over and over again. And we know his form is very delicate. Rupa Goswami explains that if a leaf touches his form, the color changes. Now, for us, you really have to kind of push hard to get the color to change. If you push really hard, your skin will blanch a little bit. But for Krishna, just a touch, just a little touch, and his form, the color changes. So this is actually very extraordinary, because Krishna is also very strong. So generally those things are incompatible, isn't it? Like we have a term for farmers, we call them rednecks. So why do we call them rednecks? Because if you're outside all the time, especially in the farming seasons, in the spring and summer and fall, the back of your neck is going to be exposed to the sun, and the skin gets very leathery, right? It gets like a permanent reddish color and very leathery and cracked. Yeah? And people who work out a lot, their skin, their body gets very tough, isn't it? Right? Like if you walk a lot, you get calluses and cracks on your feet. So how is it that Krishna is very strong and very tough? He's the toughest, but yet he's also very delicate. He's just extremely delicate. So this is very interesting. Of course, I talk about this sometimes with Srila Prabhupada, how Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet, the bottoms of his feet, looked like a newborn baby's feet. You all seen a little baby's feet before they've started to walk? Everybody's seen? If you can picture in your mind what does the bottom of a baby's foot look like? It's completely soft and pinkish, right? And it's basically impossible to use your feet and have them continue to look like that. You know, especially if you vigorously walk for an hour and a half every day, how do your feet look like that? And his servants would say that his feet that Srila Prabhupada's feet had no hard parts on them, no calluses, no cracks. So how is that possible? Practically speaking, for a physical body, that's impossible. So it's very extraordinary. Of course, there's a nice story where Prabhupada walked in England, where it rains a lot, and it's often very muddy. He took a morning walk, and all the devotees' shoes were covered with mud. And one devotee was thinking, when they get back, I'll immediately clean Srila Prabhupada's shoes. And as soon as Prabhupada stepped out of his shoes to enter the temple, this devotee rushed forward to take the shoes to clean them, and they had no mud on them. So what to speak of God? That God can have this very powerful arm that gets as hot as an iron rod. It got so hot that it burned Keshi's throat. To try to put these two things in juxtaposition. His arm is so hot that it just the presence of his arm, he's not even punching him. You follow? He's not punching him, he's not hitting him, he just sticks his arm in him and kills him. And yet the arm is so delicate that there's this mark on his arm. And I like to meditate on how Krishna's servants, and they're probably adding decorations to it, right? They're probably using these marks as part of some, just like we paint deities, right? We put flowers and vines and birds sometimes, and so I'm sure that they do that and have some jewelry that accents it. So this is, and his arms, of course, are very fragrant. Rupa's saying they're very fragrant. So, of course, Krishna's main fragrant is chatusama, which is sandalwood, camphor, aguru, and musk, which are very masculine. These are all very masculine fragrances. Aguru is a fungus that grows in the agarwood tree, and musk is from an animal. It's from a deer-type animal. And sandalwood, of course, is also wood. Camphor is also wood, and these are all very woodsy, quite literally very woodsy animal masculine fragrances. But it says his arm also has a blue lotus fragrance mixed with it, and of course Krishna's fragrance is so powerful that his friends and his lovers can always tell where he's been by his fragrance. And of course he is the source of all fragrances, and it's explained in the Ras dance when Shamala comes and puts the same left arm around her shoulders, that she is swooning from this fragrance, right? As Rupa's also saying in Hamsadutta, how he's putting his arms around his beloveds, also around his friends, and I'm sure Mother Yasoda as well, when she is embracing Krishna, smelling his arms, and the servants, when they are decorating his arms, are smelling his arms. And then Krishna, of course, milks the cows. Although he's the prince, he's milking the cows, and as he's milking the cows are also smelling his arms that are milking him and being overwhelmed by this fragrance. And of course, Krishna's arms, being very strong and very delicate, are protective. Yesterday we celebrated Father's Day, and God is known all over the material world as a Supreme Father. A king is often known as the Supreme Father. And we think of Father as both being a very tender protector and as being a very strong, tough protector, both, right? Isn't it? A father's very tender with his children. He's holding his children, he's playing with his children, he's tucking them in bed, he's feeding his children, and he's also very tough, right? You have to say please and thank you. You have to behave like a gentleman, and you have to respect your mother, and he's there to protect the family against other elements. Right? When I was in the 70s, we ladies in ISKCON, we secretly passed around this Christian book about how to be a good wife. And the husband had written a companion book about how to be a good husband. It was called Man of Steel and Velvet. So and Krishna is described, of course, as being like a thunderbolt and like a rose simultaneously. So then his form is also very sweet. And here we particularly want to look at the fact that Krishna has Advaitam Achyutam Anadim, what is that? Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam, that he has an unlimited form. So this can mean that his form can expand into apparently many, many forms. Right? He's in the Rasa Lila, and there's so many forms among all the gopis, right? Or he's expanded into everyone's heart. But it also means that his form itself is unlimited. Now, this is another paradox. Like his arm being so delicate that eternally he has Keshi's teeth marks on it, and yet it's like this thunderbolt iron rod. Or like I said in yesterday's verse, which went into in great depth, where Dayavir Prabhu went into great depth about how his arm was like a disease, right? So this juxtaposition, this seeming paradox. So Krishna's form can expand. Can you think of some instances where Krishna's form expands? In the Vishvarupa. Okay, so Arjuna's on the chariot and he says, Krishna, you've told me about how you've said to me, I'm the light of the sun and the moon, I'm the fragrance of the earth, I'm the heat and fire of, the Gandharvas, I am Chitrarata, among the sages, I am Sukaracharya, right? He gave him all these things, and Arjuna says, well, now I'd like to see it. Imagine if you told somebody, my house is like this, well, can I see it? So then Krishna expands into the universe. Thousands of heads, thousands of arms, thousands of bellies, expanded, and talking about the fragrance of his body, covered with divine sense, it is said. Thousands of fragrances without limit. And of course, a very wonderful description of the expansion of the Lord into the universe is Vamandev. So Vamandev looks like just a little boy, maybe like 8 years old, just some little kid. And he's just coming like a little boy. And Bali Maharaj says, what would you like? Oh, I want 3 paces of land. And Bali's saying, that's nothing. It would be hard to even lie down, right? You ever tried to take a nap in an airplane seat? Or just some small 2-seater thing, a little tiny, like a bench or something, and you're kind of curled up. So 3 paces of land, it hardly even gives you a place to lie down. I've spent some of my time in the Hare Krishna movement living in closets and storage sheds. And, once you put your sleeping bag down, there's no empty floor space left in the room. So that would be, he was asking for a place like that. A little storage shed, a little closet. And Bali Maharaj says, that's not very smart. You should ask for something more. And Sukracharya could understand if he's asking for 3 steps of land, then he's not actually a little boy. So Vamandev expands, and his body fills the universe, and he also shows how all the universe is within his body. As he goes from being this little boy to he encompasses, he doesn't just step through the universe. He does that. He takes 1 step, covers the earth, another step. He hits the border of the universe. And amazingly, his big toe knocks a hole in the universal coverings. Now, this is inconceivable because the first universal covering, Earth, has 10 times the diameter of the whole universe. And then the covering of water has 10 times the diameter of the covering of Earth. And we're talking about this humongous, earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intelligence, and ego. That would be interesting, huh? The covering of ego, subtle ego. Sanatana Goswami describes that there are jivas there that are enjoying pleasures millions of times greater than that which is found in the universe in a subtle form. But anyway, Vamandev's toe, it pierced through all of these coverings. How is that possible? Spatially. But it wasn't just that he was expanding and stepping, but one could see the various parts of the universe were within his body. And there are several descriptions like this of the universal form in the Bhagavatam. Like the hoofed animals are his nails, or sometimes it says the stones and the gems are his nails, and the clouds were his hair, and the rivers were his veins. Right? The ocean was his waist, and the trees were the hairs on his body. So this, of course, is always the case. It's not just the case when Vamandev expands. When we're taking a walk in the forest through the trees, we're walking on the body of the Lord. Sometimes I think about that, like sometimes you find some little insect walks on your arm, right? Through the hairs on your arm. So like that, we're walking on the body of the Lord. This whole universe is his body. I don't really have time to get into this today, but this understanding of immanence, that the universe is the body of the Lord, that God is everywhere, that everything is divine, that everything is alive, that everything is ultimately conscious. Even matter is not conscious of itself, but it's part of the body of the Lord of which he is conscious. So what are some other examples of the Lord expanding his body? Aghasura, which of course was already mentioned by our acharyas, that this expansion of the Lord's arm in the body of Keshi was similar to Aghasura, and very similar way of killing the demon, choking him. So Krishna choked up Keshi, and Krishna also choked up Aghasura. The life heirs didn't have, as Jiva Goswami so nicely explained in Gopal Champu so poetically, the life heirs were thinking, well, that door's shut, let me pop out of another door. But another example I was thinking of, which is very subtle, is that of Mother Yasoda tying up Krishna. Because there, visually, the Lord didn't seem to expand at all. He seemed to stay a very little boy, and I think it's Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur who mentions that he had a kinkini belt. He had a belt tied around his waist. So you imagine there, he's a very little boy, probably like 2 years old, something like little Nasinga, a very, very little boy. So how big is their waist? Like this big? I mean, very, very small. And he had a belt around his waist, and yet when Mother Yasoda is trying to tie ropes around the waist, they wouldn't fit. So this means his body's expanded without it apparently looking like it's expanded. You look at it and you think, how is this happening? And Mother Yasoda was very bewildered by this. At first she was very angry. I mean, it's a loving anger, right? That's an anger rasa. That although it's not exactly, in parental rasa, it's not exactly an anger rasa. Anger rasa is mostly at the demons, but it's similar to that. It's more of a Vyavichari bhav. But she's upset that I can't tie up Krishna. I'm his mother, I'm supposed to take care of him, I'm supposed to correct him, and I can't tie him up. And then after a while, she just started laughing. Do you ever laugh when you get very frustrated? You're really trying to do something and you're frustrated over and over again, and finally you just find the humor in the whole situation. So she just started laughing. And once she started laughing, then Krishna allowed her to tie him up. So that's an extraordinary story of this paradox. Right, where Krishna is both this little boy with a belt on, and yet his body is unlimited and expansive, and yet he can't be tied up. So this is the very sweetness of the Lord's form, and something the impersonalists cannot understand. People who say God can't have a form. They can't grasp that he can have a form that's not a material limited form. Then I was also thinking now, Krishna's demon killing is sweet, and this is, of course, mentioned in the Madhurastakam. So, of course, the demon killing is sweet because the bad guys get their comeuppance. And we all like it when the bad guys get their comeuppance, right? Don't we all like that? Doesn't that make for a good story? One of the main reasons people read the news. They want to find out how the bad guys got it. It's very satisfying, isn't it? Yeah? the murderer, the rapist, the arsonist, the thief, they got caught. And there's, I don't know, thousands and thousands and thousands of fictional books and movies and TV shows and plays about bad guys getting caught, isn't it? And people will just, they'll hear these and watch these over and over and over again. Oh, good, the bad guys get caught. Even if it's a fictional story, people are very enthusiastic. So in that way, it's very pleasing whenever Krishna smashes the bad guys in the universe. Everybody is celebrating. But when Krishna smashes the bad guys, it's a restorative kind of justice. It's not just punitive. Like here, the passing of stool of Keshi is compared to the leaving of his anartas, his impurities. And that Krishna also smashed his subtle body of his pride. All right, remember Keshi represents the pride of someone thinking, I don't need a guru, I don't need the devotees. So Krishna also smashed his pride. And we find this whenever Krishna kills the demons, he also kills their demoniac tendency. You know, it's not just like the police catch a bad guy and they put him behind bars and the guy's still a bad guy, he's just behind bars. But we really like the stories when the bad guys change. Don't we really like those stories? The repentant stories. Because we all know, if we're honest, that to some extent we're all bad guys, right? I mean, we may not be murderers and arsonists and rapists and thieves, but we're all in one sense bad guys. If we know that. We all have a sense of that. We all have a sense that I know I'm envious, I know I'm lusty, I know I'm greedy, I know I'm selfish. We know that. And, you know, we would like to be rid of these things. We're not quite sure how to do it, and we try over and over again unsuccessfully. And so we get very enlivened at stories of redemption. Any stories of redemption, stories of second chances, stories of somebody being able to reform themselves gives us hope that, well, I can be redeemed. I can be rid of these bad qualities. And Krishna, whenever he kills demons, it's like that. He also kills their demoniac mentality. Of course, Mahaprabhu does that without physical killing. So that's also very sweet. I mean, he purifies them so much that they get some sort of liberation. Like Keshi here got Sayuja Mukti, or sometimes they get Swarupya Mukti. And this is, we were hearing the other day about Gadadhar Pandit, when Pundarik Vidyanidhi heard this sloka about how Putana became a nurse. He was in ecstasy. Wow, that's amazing. What level of sweetness. But I was also thinking how Krishna's killing of the demons is very sweet by the different ways he kills the demons. He's so innovative. You know, it's not always like a revolver, right? It's very innovative. I don't know, you know, I haven't done some sort of sociological research on what are all the ways the bad guys are killed in real life and in fiction. But I would guess we're not going to have quite as many innovative ways as Krishna has. Right? Just sticks in his left arm, expands his left arm, and the demon's body explodes. Walks into the demon's mouth. Right? Or one where, of course, he didn't kill him, but dancing on his head. Just using his hand, cutting off a head. Taking him by his foot and swinging him around and throwing him up into a tree. Putting him on his lap and opening him up with his nails. Kicking him a little bit with his foot. I mean, he has like all these different ways of killing demons. One of the funniest ones is saying, I don't think you should believe Lord Shiva. Why don't you touch your own head and check it out? I mean, it's sweet, isn't it? It's charming, it's attractive. As Jiva Goswami is saying, the Vira Ras, this chivalry Ras. And the chivalry Ras has 4 subcategories. One of them is Dharma Vira. Right? One is Daya Vira, of course. But the fighting is one of them, the Yuddha Vira and the Dharma Vira, righteous fighting. We all want to hear about people who are really righteous, don't we? They're really good. They don't compromise their righteous principles, and they fight chivalrously. So Krishna's like this, and therefore his demon killing is very sweet. So Krishna's arm is sweet, his form that can expand is sweet, his demon killing is sweet, everything is sweet. Madhuradi pater akilam madhuram. So we have this Krishna consciousness movement to become attracted to this all-attractive personality. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.